Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Rights and Democracy's television show, monthly television show, every fourth Friday, live at 5:25. This month's episode is called Whirlwind. So this is your local television connection to Rights and Democracy, the grassroots, people-powered organization committed to building an underground, grassroots, independent political movement for fundamental change towards social, economic, and environmental justice.
I'm not trying to stay underground all the time, though.
Yeah, right. No. So we've got a packed show this month. We've been up to a whole lot of stuff. We're going to get right into it. Issues around bias-free policing policies have been up in the legislature. A collection of roadside stop race data. That's we're trying to look into that a little bit more on a legislative level. Updates on victories and losses on economic justice in the State House, and a ton of actions that we've taken part in Vermont and D.C. over the past month. Rights and Democracy organizer Jeff Caesar has firsthand reporting from his testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and a healthcare rally in Montpelier this past month. He'll also talk about RAD support for migrant dairy workers and a program that's getting designed to respect them a little more thoroughly called Milk with Dignity. There was a rally to support that effort at the local Ben & Jerry's corporate offices in South Burlington. So he was there that day. Hello, Jeffrey. Thanks for joining us this month.
How's it going, Grant?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
Glad you could be back.
Yeah.
Rights and Democracy Political Engagement Director, Isaac Grimm here. He'll bring us some updates from the Vermont Raise the Wage campaign, the campaign for paid family medical leave, and a report back from People's Action Founding Convention in D.C. this past weekend. And he'll also be introducing us to movement politics. Thanks for being here, Isaac.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Grant. Good to be here.
So Jeffrey, what did you testify to the Senate about this month?
Yeah, so H-492 was going up in front of the House earlier this month, and I wrote my testimony on what it's like being a person of color living not just in Vermont, but throughout the country. Living in Vermont is a completely unique story because, we are Black people specifically are 1.6% of the population of Vermont. Conversely, Vermont is 95% white. And so it's a really interesting dynamic, really being the only person like you in your space at almost any given time. Mm-hmm. When you boil down the statistics, I have a better chance of meeting another person of color, another Black person in prison in Vermont than I do just walking down the street, and that's fact. I'll go days without seeing a single other person that I know that's of color, that I don't already know of color. And so it's a very real reality that it's difficult to internalize if you don't experience that. So when I gave my testimony, I was talking about impartial bias, implicit bias, and what it really does. Because implicit bias, as defined by the National Courts Foundation, it's the underlying thoughts and cognitive processes that lead you to a conclusion or action that you don't necessarily realize were there to begin with. So, the age-old example of someone walking down the street and they clutch their purse and walk to the other side, that's implicit bias. You didn't realize that that's necessarily why you did it, but you reacted in that way. And what's really unfortunate is that, this often comes out in ways that people don't quite realize. People might think they're very well-meaning, wonderful, and progressive and liberal, and they voted for Obama, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are free from implicit bias. Everyone has it, but some people's bias is, more harmful to the communities around them than others. I wrote my initial testimony for H-492, and, I spelt it out what that was and how it feels in front, for the House Judiciary Committee. When I actually went up to give my testimony, it was as if it was fate, because the very week before, I was hit with a very a strong instance of implicit bias, and it's something that these stories gone untold. They do a lot of damage, and so at Rights and Democracy, I do outreach, and every once in a while we go door to door and we're canvassing, talking to the community. This is an integral part of my job, because being able to speak with the community members directly of what's working, what's not working, what our policy is, and how it affects them, and then being able to go to the State House with Isaac and talk about ways that we can help legislators get involved and actually incorporate the needs of their constituents into their policy making. And it's a core function of my job. So one day I was going out, wonderful lady, so we thought, she
You knocked on their door, the residence, yeah?
Correct.
Okay,
I knocked on her door.
Yeah. Were you alone?
I was alone. I was alone. And one of the things is that, myself being as a person of color, I'm very cautious of how I am, how I present myself, what I do, and where I am at all times. In an instance where you're going door to door and you're by yourself, I specifically go out of my way to make sure that I'm dressed up. I'm, wearing a button down and a proper hat, and I don't look threatening, and my hands are in a certain way, and if someone invites me into their house, then I'm very conscious that I'm going to stand very close to the door. I'm not going to eyeball anything around them. I don't care if they have dogs or cats running behind them. I'm making eye contact, because I know that it's a very real possibility that they can say, oh, well, this young man came in and he was, looking at what was in my house. Anyone who knows me know that's not the case. And so, it was,
which is kind of a hint of implicit bias in itself, saying
That you have to do
how
that.
you're dressed. Yeah, all of this thought and work that you put into respecting everything that you're doing and the people that you're approaching is something that people with a different color skin maybe don't have to do. This is what we're trying to highlight, right?
Absolutely.
So tell us some more about this interaction.
Yeah, thank you. And it's very true, because it's one of those things that we constantly have to account for and work to actively mitigate in order for us to navigate a very white space without problems. But even when you do that, as you can see, there are problems. So, long story short, we had a great time. We talked about the different policy measures. She was very involved in the community. She was very interested in the Progressive Party and the stuff that we're doing. She even shouted out a few of her neighbors that were saying they're very progressive, they're very progressive, they're Republican, don't go there, which was her own implicit bias on the other side.
Yeah.
So no one escapes it. But later on that evening, I get a phone call from my director saying, hey, this post showed up. Apparently, this woman lost her phone within relative time of me showing up, and so she calls the police, reports her phone stolen, her donation stolen. That I was from a fake organization, and that all the neighbors beware if they have any information on this young man who's stopped by.
Okay. Let me just ask you right now.
Yeah.
Does she have her phone back? Did she find it?
I'm sure she does.
Oh, you don't. We don't know yet. Well,
I'm sure she does. That's
okay. Anyways,
It's,
this is yeah. No, I mean
Yeah.
I've lost my phone before too, but
I mean, everyone's lost their phone.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's
I'm
really
sorry.
good.
I'm sorry to even hear about all this.
you don't have to apologize for it, because it was like that. That's the reality of the world we live in, and that was that instance. I contacted her. We talked about it. She apologized. She reposted, updated the blog post, and all that.
That
goodness.
never would have happened to me.
Yeah.
I knocked like 10,000 doors over the last 2 years, and and I don't have to think about that. Like, I don't have to think about how people perceive me. As like a man, I don't have to worry about things women worry about. As a white man, I don't have to worry about being judged
Wearing
with
a
like
hoodie.
any of these horrible stereotypes that are like centuries old and that come from like propaganda to, justify slavery and segregation and all this stuff. And and like it takes work on everybody's part to like realize our own implicit bias, and a lot of that comes from just like you have to have actual real relationships with people. Like I've grown so much because of my girlfriend, who's a woman of color, and just it's like this long process of, oh, that's how you perceived that, like that interaction. I never would have thought about it that way, because I don't have to worry about like
Never.
how people perceive me, because I just get the benefit of the doubt, like always.
Always. Yeah.
And that like hit the whole team really hard, just
Yeah.
like, oh God, like, I mean, there's so many things, over the last couple of years that have been like really blatant instances of like how racist, like, people in Vermont can be, and how like this lack of interaction with people of color means that people don't get it, that white people don't get it.
Or a lack of acknowledgement.
Yeah, but that really like kind of brought it home.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
and it has a huge effect, just as Isaac was saying, on the community at large. And so, that was that instance. What does that do? The next day, I had to go into work, extremely uncomfortable. So we switched my role.
Publicly slandered.
Oh yeah, publicly slandered.
That's not even.
And then unslandered. But
Yeah.
she teaches social activism, and that was another part of it. Is that like her job is to do this very work that we're doing right now. And so even us within this community, we don't get to check boxes saying that we're not racist because X, Y, and Z we voted for Obama, or whatever that looks like to you.
Any qualification.
We always have to be ardent that we're taking note, being conscious, being aware of the people around us and how we're interacting with them, because we don't know.
So is this kind of what you shared at your testimony?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And that's like gone in a really good direction in the State House this year. And it's thanks to people from all over the state. I know at least hundreds of people were calling their representatives and their senators on this. There was a huge amount of pressure. And like a lot of our legislative leaders, like Kaya Morris from Bennington, Coach Christie, and Deanna Gonzalez, who are like 3 legislators of color in our State House who were lead sponsors on this. They did a ton of work to make it happen and to like overcome the kind of resistance from the police department, because it makes,
So what's happening? It's a fair and impartial policing policy, or bias-free policing policy?
Yeah, so there's 2 basically pieces of it. One is the creation of a racial justice oversight board that's tasked with seeing how implementation is going on things like fair and impartial policing, and with the possibility of reviewing the way that racism and implicit bias play out in other institutions in our state. So just having this kind of like accountability measure of a board that will actually be like looking at these things together and being able to show us what progress we're making and where we're not making progress is really critical. And then a separate bill that was kind of taken as originally it was all in one bill, and then it was separated out into 2 bills. The other is around like one uniform policy on fair and impartial policing, which is really critical given like the traffic stop data that people of color are pulled over at a way higher rate than white people, and the prison rate is 10 times higher for black people than white people in Vermont.
Yep.
All these numbers that show that there's a serious problem. We need to have a better policy that like all of our police departments are following, and have oversight to make sure that this is happening. And it's not just about police. It's not only the criminal justice system. That's like one of the, I think, ways in which it rears its head in the worst way. But you can see it in the education system. You can see it,
especially
in a lot
now
of
that we're
institutions.
collecting more data, from police departments, and
which is good, and that's been because of organizing by people of color that like that's actually happening.
And it's very important that as this bill goes forward, that our legislators are not gutting the bill for its true intent, because this is a bill that was designed by people of color who understand the nuance, the issues, the context that we have to deal with these issues within. And if you don't experience them, you can't fix it. You can't, especially if you don't understand it. So it's very important that the oversight boards are placed, that are stacked independently from the police commission, from the attorney general, that they are and done so by people of color, and organizations that are vested interest in the livelihoods of people of color in the
that
communities.
live in the communities.
Correct.
And teach and have jobs that are not a police chief or or attorney general or something like that, right? Yeah.
And there's another like really big avenue that I wasn't able to be there, unfortunately, but you were there when it comes to the way people are treated differently by nationality and by race. We have migrant workers, about 1,500 migrant workers in Vermont that are in very low wage positions, in a very kind of tenuous situation, especially now under the Trump administration when they're targeting migrant justice activists. But ICE is like clearly targeting public figures who are organizing for human rights. And you were able to...
Out of 3 migrant justice workers that were targeted and picked up 2 months ago now by ICE, 2, I think, are back in Vermont.
Yep.
But one is still is still in trouble. And so, yeah.
But you were able to be there at a recent action in support of their campaign, right? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's the fair and policing, the fair and impartial policing bill. It also extends very much over the migrant justice issue. And when you look at it, what happened there? You had 3 activists that are prominent in the migrant justice community. They were strategically picked off by law enforcement in order to not just send them outside of the country, but this was an attack on liberty and freedom of speech and the ability for the migrant justice movement to move forward in a meaningful way. They're telling the migrant workers that they don't have rights, that they don't have the ability to advocate for themselves, and if they do, they need to leave. And that's not what America's about. You don't need to have citizenship to be entitled your First Amendment. That's fact.
Yep.
So.
And what was the
That's the rules. That's the rules.
Right. And the Milk with Dignity action that you were at, that was
yes, the Milk and Dignity action that we were at. It was at the Ben & Jerry's headquarters, just in South Burlington, and it was an incredibly powerful event. There was about 10 organizations over the course of a couple days that brought out their own delegations and met with migrant justice, walked into the headquarters and had a conversation with the leadership
of Ben & Jerry's.
Of Ben & Jerry's, correct. And so we were very fortunate the time that our event was that our delegation had gone to the protest. They were holding a large board meeting, so we were able to speak with a few of the representatives that were there from out of town. A few of the representatives came out with us and tried to talk with us, but the question is, how far are they really going to go and push this? Because about 2 years ago, they had already come to make a deal that they would start instituting fair wages for their migrant workers.
So what happened? What's going on with that? It's not moving?
It hasn't gone anywhere. It
right.
has,
2 years, they say, okay, we're gonna start doing something. You guys calm down, and then 2 years go by, and they're just kind of dragging their feet.
Yep.
When we all understand that an ice cream company like Ben & Jerry's is supported by Unilever in the end, could an international scale fame, all based on actually how we've been treating these dairy workers for 30 or 40 years now, because it hasn't been the local white guys from Vermont that have been milking all these cows necessarily, right? So, and it's been going on for a long time, folks. Anyways, so these guys start speaking up for themselves. ICE is targeting them. Migrant Justice wants to help with the ACLU, right, in Vermont, and a couple other organizations to push this Milk with Dignity thing. Ben & Jerry's dragging their feet for 2 years now. You guys got out there and did the actions.
Yeah, and Ben & Jerry's is, they do so much good for the community and the world around them. And their position within Unilever allows them a unique opportunity to take the corporate social responsibility that they've been championing since they've begun and implement that not just on a national level, but on an international level, as Unilever's based in the UK. They have that ability to really matriculate into all those brands and create change from the bottom up, from such a huge figurehead.
Right.
So it's more than just, while the migrant justice workers are the pinnacle of this fight, and this is for them, and we're showing up for them, this is also so much bigger than just that.
Hey, if it's not fun, why do it? Right. To help save human rights for people, right? Let's get to it. And then can we not see that little pint of ice cream right now? Milk with Dignity.
Yep, that should be a thing.
Internationally funding, supporting these workers in Vermont, and then even in a bigger process, right?
Ben & Jerry's, Dignity's delicious.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, it's coming. Yeah, Dignity's delicious.
Write it down.
Oh, all right, I'm
Make an ice
loving
cream
it.
after
I'm
it.
loving it. Thank you for getting out there and doing that.
Of course.
Yeah.
It was well. Thank you for Migrant Justice they've been
doing
putting
amazing
so much work and just like my situation a couple weeks ago, that was so small scale. Like these folks, Kike, Sully, Enrique, they got picked up and it was nationally covered, and that's such a springboard, and but it's also it shows what the times are looking like right now. And if organizations and companies like Ben & Jerry's don't act fast, then they're gonna miss a stellar opportunity to really be a leader more than
right now specifically, right. So we're running a little bit behind. I wanted to jump over, make sure we get to Isaac and some updates from their campaigns. livable wages, paid family leave in Vermont.
Yep.
How's this going?
Well, this session has been, I would say it's been a really frustrating session. Some good things have happened, but I wouldn't call it the kind of response that we need to Trump's agenda and to the attacks that are coming down on working families, on women, on people of color, on the LGBT community. Like, we need a bold response, and we need like a drastic response to this.
Still
and
need
I would
a political revolution.
Absolutely,
Even
absolutely.
though Bernie's
now,
not president, right?
Now more than ever.
Still need a political revolution.
Well, and you know what? It's not just about one person running for president, right? It's about everybody in the community getting active, pressuring our legislators to do the right thing. It's about us running on a local level. It's about a lot of things. But some highlights of this session. I guess I'll start with the good, and then I'll talk about what we have not accomplished and need to move forward on. Some things that we've thrown down on and gotten folks to come in and testify on and have helped move forward would be a bill to get better accommodations for pregnant workers. Currently, there's protections for women who have complications due to pregnancy, but there are not the kind of protections that healthy pregnant women need at their job. So there's been suits that have been brought up of women who have not been allowed to actually just have a cup of water with them when they're working while they're pregnant, or be able to sit or take like a slight break. So there was a really important bill move forward on that. And we had some great members testify around that, and that was actually really great to see it move through both the House and the Senate. Actually, today there was a bill that was passed in the House a little while back, and it just got through the Senate today, which is great, which will be to have PTSD covered under workers' comp for first responders in the state. So firefighters, EMTs, police officers who are putting their lives at risk in the benefit of the community around them all the time, and trauma and PTSD is inherently going to be a part of just the nature of that work. Right. And so just the basic kind of protection that they shouldn't have the burden of proof on them to be able to get the coverage they need for a traumatic incident and be able to recover. Right. So for us, it made total sense that much of our work is focused around human rights and how we advance that in a number of different ways. And it's really important that we be breaking down this false dichotomy between physical health and mental health. Mental health is healthcare. Healthcare is a human right. Everyone deserves that. This was an important step towards that for first responders. Family medical leave just got out of House Appropriations Committee yesterday. Just to break it down really quick, every country in the world, basically, except for the United States, has some form of paid family and medical leave. Paternity leave, maternity leave, parental care. We only have that in 4 states in the United States right now. Vermont, if we move forward with this, could be the 5th. Right now, people can get paid unpaid time off, but that doesn't mean much for most working families. People can't afford to take the real time off that they need to bond with newborn children, or to be able to have the time off for an injury or an illness, or to care for an elderly parent or relative who needs that kind of care. Which in
all these situations, we would hope in a happier society, or even a kind of a standard of living, that we socially could provide some sort of support to people in each of these
that's
situations.
Exactly
so
that's the point of a program like that is. It's an insurance program so that small businesses who can't afford to just provide that on their own, there can be a statewide insurance program that everybody pays into and that you can use when you need it. Right? I mean, that's just like the basis of a social safety net. Right? It's just that kind of thing is a really critical way for us to have healthier communities, healthy families, to attract more young families into the state, for people to stay. Exactly.
Stay progressive.
So that's coming up for a vote on Tuesday next week, and if people, everybody who's listening right now, please contact your legislators around that so we can make sure that gets passed out of the House next week. That's a really, really important bill. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah. There's that feeds into a really false narrative that's been big in the States since the 80s. That people are going bankrupt just because they don't know how to manage their money, or they're buying things they shouldn't buy. People are going bankrupt because of loss of job, family illness. They need to pay, or they're getting laid off because they have to take off time to take care of themselves or their family members, or they have to pay for the medical bills, which are insane. So it's
there's been decades-long right-wing propaganda kind of push to make everybody think that if you're poor, it's your fault. If you're rich, it's because you're better somehow. While they're dismantling all public institutions, trying to privatize, basic human services, trying to
Right.
have everything basically taken over by the private sector, which is
Create a
focused on
even
profits and not on
starker
people.
line between the haves and the have-nots.
Yep, and that's why we're at this unprecedented level of inequality we haven't seen since the 20s and 30s.
I think we have about 5 minutes left. Would you like to speak about DC and
Yeah.
movement politics a
Totally.
little bit? Okay.
So one other piece that just around legislation that hasn't moved forward this session has been the minimum wage. There's a massive support for a $15 minimum wage in our state and in our country, and the legislature did not move forward with that this session, and that's been very frustrating. But there's been a commitment from some key legislators, so we need to hold their feet to the fire. People need to be organizing for this all year so we can make sure that it gets passed next year. Movement politics. So we as Rights and Democracy are not only concerned with passing legislation, but with supporting, building leadership in our communities and in having people actually rise up and take positions of power in our state. So movement politics is the way that we view elections. We don't think that we should ignore elections or ignore the state because there's a lot of bad things. We think we need to have a clear analysis of if we want it to be better, we got to jump into it and we got to change it. But we can't just do elections they are done by business as usual, Democrats and Republicans just building up for a huge thing, getting somebody elected, and then everything fades away after that. We view this as a year-round effort, as a long-term project for us to build true democracy, and we view elections as a punctuation mark in movement building. So everything that we need to do with getting people from the movement elected is about building leadership on our organizing teams around the state and on making sure that there's a real relationship between the people that get elected and the people that got them there, and that the day after the election, we're thinking about, okay, what's next? How do we make sure that we co-govern with these people that we got into office, and how did we build leadership within our team, not just how did we use people to get someone into office.
Right.
So we're going to be holding trainings for movement politics around the state and throwing down in the elections next year in a big way.
All right. So we've got just a couple of minutes left, and I think we'll let everybody know what's coming up in the next month. So let's see, we've got a lot of things coming on.
A lot of things coming up. Why don't we'll just go back and forth on it.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, People's Climate March. Yeah, that's going to be in Montpelier, it's going to be in DC, it's going to be all around the country. If you need a lift, you can go to radvt.org. Shoot us a message, and we'll be carpooling tomorrow morning from the Rights and Democracy office behind the Champlain Senior Center. It's going to be from 12 to 2 in Montpelier at the State House. So come out and show support. Climate change is like the biggest crisis facing our species, and we need to do something about it. Tomorrow's a chance.
All right.
RSVP on the Facebook page, and also you can post on there for rides as well. People will gladly pick you up.
All right. So Tuesday, May 2nd, we've got Hands Up for Peace. That's at South Burlington High School, Unity Action. That's going to go on from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m., just an hour there. And I guess just check it out on the internet. I'm sure there's some more information somewhere.
All right, I think we're really short on time here. So other big things coming up. David Zuckerman's holding a high school town hall meeting in Colchester on May 4th. May 6th, Elise Greaves, our lead organizer, will be taking part in an event with Black Lives Matter, My Sister's Keeper conference. That's on Saturday, May 6th. May 11th, we're going to have a webinar with David Zuckerman, Kaya Morris, Selena Colburn, a number of amazing progressive legislators, and that will be online, so check that out on our website. And on May 20th, there will be a large summit in Central Vermont, in Montpelier, to get folks who are getting involved in indivisible groups together, networking and building, so that we can continue the resistance.
Mm-hmm. And in case you guys didn't already know, Black Lives Matter. So, catch me outside. We have 2 minutes left.
Cool.
The town hall meeting that we had last week was also pretty good. Jess Early put that together. It was a really awesome event. We had a great turnout, and the legislators, unfortunately Phil Scott wasn't one of them.
Surprise.
That was an empty seat on the panel, so Phil Scott, where you at? Come back with us. We've got to make sure that our families in Vermont are getting appropriate access to health care.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. A lot of people are dying every day because they don't have the ability to pay for it. So
Yeah, so thanks everybody. It's been a great show. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having
Rights
us.
and
Grant.
Democracy live at 5:25 every fourth Friday.
We'll
Love
see
you guys.
We'll see you next month.
Come on back.